Hello, everyone. Thanks, Anna, for that. And thanks, Jessica, for the introduction. Welcome back for those of you that are rejoining us. We took last week off, but we're back with featuring another cuisine of the world, another significant global cuisine, which is the cuisine of North Africa. So by that, we mean the nations that border the Mediterranean Sea to the north on the north edge of Africa, including Morocco. We're featuring Morocco and Egypt in tonight's class, but also including the other nations of Tunisia, Algeria, and Libya. So each with their distinct regional cuisine, they share some ingredients, some patterns, and some methods, but each has their own distinct type of cuisine. So we're gonna, as far as the structure of tonight's class, we are going to start with a nutrition piece, talking a little bit more information about whole grains, what we mean when we talk about whole, refined, and enriched grains. And then we'll talk kind of generally about the cuisine of both Morocco and Egypt. We're going to do a little bit of knife work and skills at the cutting board, some review and some new stuff. And then we're going to be taking it to the stove, because the one kind of complex part of the kosherie is that you're just juggling a lot of pots. So I'll kind of show you how that looks as we balance 4 different pots. If you have 4 spots on your range at home, you'll use all 4 for this dish. And so I'll show you how to kind of balance those and time that out. So welcome. So I just wanted to start, we've mentioned a little bit about whole grains in the past, but I wanted to get a little bit more in depth, because tonight we're going to be using 2 whole grain items, one of which is this, the brown rice. This dish, optionally, you could use the brown rice or the white. I'm choosing to use the whole grains for some of the health and nutrition benefits that we're talking about today. The pasta, the whole grain pasta, we're using a whole grain penne. Again, an alternative would be the macaroni noodle or some similar shape of noodle that would be a refined grain. So what are we really talking about with these grains when we say whole grains? So I have a little piece here. I think you can probably see the picture. I'll read some of the text just to talk about more specifically what is the parts of the whole grain, and then what are the parts that are removed in the case of the whole grain. So this may be a review for some, but what we're looking at is the bran, or what we call the bran, which contains the fiber. Is the outer layer that has B vitamins, minerals, and fiber. The germ, which is the other part of the whole grain that's removed to make the refined grain, is a nutrient-packed core with B vitamins, vitamin E, phytochemicals, and healthy fats. So these are the 2 elements that are contained in the whole grain that are not in the refined grain. When you see refined or enriched, refined means that the bran and the germ have been taken away. If you've ever seen like a wheat germ on its own at the store, the germ itself you can buy separately. That's been removed. And in most cases with the white rice, it's been refined, meaning the bran and the germ have been removed, but then it's also been enriched, meaning some of the vitamins have been added back. So that's commonly what we see with whole grains like rice. With pasta, same thing. The pasta that's used to extrude or shape the pasta, in the one case contains the bran and the germ, and in the other case does not. I was actually kind of confounded when I went to the grocery store, because I was looking for a whole grain pasta item, and I was in the pasta section at my local King Soopers. I saw, you know, probably 50 varieties and shapes of the refined pasta. Or sorry, yeah, the refined pasta, and there was only like 4 types or shapes of the whole grain. So just a reminder, like there's not the consumer demand necessarily there. We've sort of been attuned, many of us, to eating the white pasta, but the whole grain carries all sorts of health benefits, and it's really no much more difficult to cook. Just talking about the cooking process with each of these, the main difference is that the brown rice does take about twice as long as white rice to fully cook. So it took, I have a pot on the stove today instead of a pressure cooker or rice cooker, and it took about 45 minutes, whereas the white rice would have taken 20 to 25. And the pasta may take, in this case, 1 or 2 more minutes for the penne. So really very small difference between the 2. Why do we not eat more whole grains? It's consumer tastes have been moved towards the white or refined process. It, of course, does take a little bit more time. But again, pre-planning, thinking about your time frame for your dish, you know, even preparing the, let's say, brown rice in advance so that it's not last minute and you're not waiting on the rice, right? You're always, no one wants to be waiting on the rice. So that totally works too. And you could reheat that rice. Just changing kind of the way you think about it and trying to, maybe you don't integrate whole grains into every single dish or a dish with your family meal, but at least maybe 1 or 2 times a week, starting to use or move towards a whole grain item and trying to kind of just the benefits, the health benefits are immense. And if you can create dishes like we're making today that are delicious, really good, and the whole grain makes a great substitute, I think it's a great idea if you can start to integrate. With my own kids who are in their teen years now, the move from refined white macaroni noodles to whole grain noodles helped because we just cooked the whole grain noodles and then we tossed it directly in a cheese sauce that we made and kind of covered it up in a way like with a nice sauce that they liked. And they were like, "What is this? Oh, it tastes different." It's like, okay, yep. So just finding ways to bring some whole grains into your diet is a great recommendation. We're using 2 of them today. So that's that nutrition piece. Now I just want to talk a little bit about the cuisine of each nation that we're working with today. Morocco. So Morocco, I've spent only 24 hours in Morocco. I jumped on a ferry once from Spain and went to Morocco and Tangier. And wow, what a wild and interesting place. The streets I just remember are all over the place. It's like a big maze. All the sights, the smells, the sounds, the markets, everything about it kind of hits you. And I still remember that 24 hours very vividly. And in thinking about and researching the cuisine, I looked up a little bit of the history, and many of the ingredients and processes are based on the food of the Berbers, which is the indigenous people of North Africa. And a lot of those culinary traditions still are found in current Moroccan cuisine. The lamb is the most popular meat protein. They still eat a lot of lamb. And a couple of the dishes that are very prevalent and are cooked throughout the country are couscous, which is really just a type of pasta that's very, very small. Some people think that's a grain itself, but it's really just a very small, minute pasta. Couscous, and then tagine, which is a dish that's cooked in a very particularly shaped, like a conical pot. So it steams all the ingredients and it ends up with like a luscious, slow-cooked stew. So there's also a significant French influence after colonization of Morocco by France. So there's a lot of French food and French cuisine in the country as well. If we could go to the board, I'll show you a few other ingredients we're not using directly today in our recipe, but I just wanted to mention and discuss, which was they have preserved lemons. Oh, we can see it there. Yep. So one of them is preserved lemons. I don't know if anyone's had preserved lemons, but what it is that these are small lemons, but you can also use full-size ones. And you pack them in salt, and you pack them in their own juice mixed with salt, and you smash them into a container, and you leave them for anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. And then it ends up being like a kind of fermented, interesting, like kind of vinegary, lemony, salty peel. And you take the peel off and you cut the peel off in small pieces and like chop it up, and then you can use it in a variety of dishes. So again, we're not using it in today's dish, but that's one ingredient they use quite a bit. This other one, I just had a friend return from Morocco with this, and this is harissa, Harissa. And this is a hot sauce. And the ingredients I'll read to you. It's just hot pepper, red hot pepper, garlic, coriander, salt, caraway, and a bit of citric acid. So that's just a fiery hot sauce that they utilize a lot, almost as a condiment, kind of like we might use a hot sauce in our country. I included just the basic method for a mint tea because one of the things I recall about being in Morocco is people sit outside at the cafes and they drink a mint tea. So just hot water poured over mint, they add sugar or honey, and then it's something that they use just as a relaxant and a digestive aid because mint is good for helping to digest meals. And so it's sort of a tradition that people gather and drink mint tea. So those are a few of the interesting ingredients from Morocco. The Egyptian food and the Egyptian dish that we're making today is called kosherie. This is a street food of Egypt. It's sometimes called Egypt's national dish. It has ancient roots. It was written about hundreds of years ago, and in the 1850s, someone traveled to Egypt and described it as like a breakfast meal, or could be eaten for any meal of the day. I would say maybe more of a lunch or dinner in our world. And there's a lot of different variations on it. So for example, you could use brown rice or white rice. You could use a white pasta or a wheat pasta like we're using today. we're using lentils, you could use garbanzo beans. The hot sauce, there's sort of a hot tomatoey sauce that ties it all together that you'll see we'll add on at the end. And that is one of the simplest, easiest hot sauces you'll make because it's really just tomatoes, a jalapeno pepper, garlic, a touch of oil and salt. You blend it, puree it, and then just cook it down. So it's like a super simple, but really like fresh tomatoey hot sauce. And one of my favorite dishes. So I just love the way this dish kind of ties together all these different elements, but yet when you eat it, you can eat like a solid plate of it, but not feel too heavy or weighed down. So, all right, so that's the intro, and we will go back to the board and we'll start with the Moroccan carrot salad that we're making today. So just to showcase some of the ingredients that we're going to be using for this. Hopefully you can get a good view of that. We're using, as the flavoring agents, we're using garlic, which we're going to mince and chop very finely. It says you could use a mortar and pestle, which is fine too if you have one, but I'm just going to chop with a little salt and kind of make like a paste. We're using cumin seeds, which we're going to toast. So we're going to add the garlic and cumin seeds together, make kind of a fragrant paste in the pan with olive oil. And then the carrots themselves, I've pre-cooked the carrot. I've pre-cooked some pieces of carrot that we're going to use, but I'll just show you how I cut that and how we have that. There's a cooked version of this dish that we're making, and then there's also a raw version. So the fresh parsley gets added at the end. The raw version, you would just take the carrots and peel them and grate them. So it would be like a grated salad. And you toss it all together, you cook it up. You cook up the garlic and cumin similarly, and then just toss the lemon, olive oil, parsley, and the garlic and cumin over the raw shredded carrot. But what we're doing today is I peeled this carrot, and the important thing with a lot of the things that we're doing, one of the themes of today is consistency. And so if we're going to cut this, we're going to cut it into diagonal pieces, and we're just trying to get them consistent so that they're all about equal and they all cook at about the same amount of time. So with any round vegetable, we want to first cut it and create a flat surface. Like so. So we're laying them flat. And then I'm just gonna offset them with my knife a little like this on the diagonal. And it doesn't really matter what thickness you do. I like something that's big enough to like stick a fork in, so you can eat the salad with a fork. But as you can see, I'm just trying to get about the same consistency. Even though the carrot is larger at the one end than the other, the pieces should cook about evenly. The recipe calls for steaming. You could also put them in boiling water and then just pull them out when they're almost done, because you're just going to finish the cooking process in the pan. So take these away. Garlic. We've cooked with garlic a few times in previous weeks. For this, we're just going to smash it either with your hand or with the side of a knife. Peel. Cut off the little brown nibs at the end. And then just keeping our knife on the board, we're just going to go cut through it and mince it. I have some coarse salt here, and if it's true, if you add a bit of salt, which we're adding to the dish anyway, you can, as you pass your knife through, you can almost feel there's like a roughness and a texture. It kind of starts to break down the garlic and helps make it into more like a paste, which is what we want. Because for this dish, we don't want like big pieces of garlic. We kind of want more of a garlic taste throughout. You can even use the side of your knife to kind of flatten and smash it a little more. And as anyone who has burnt garlic knows, as I've had burnt garlic many times, garlic actually has a bit of sugar to it, some natural sugar. That's why it's kind of sticky on your hand as you cut it. So that's why it burns so quickly. It has some natural sugars. So when you get it to a paste-like consistency or very, very small, I'm gonna add this to our cumin. I'm gonna cook this together in the pan. That's our main seasoning mix. So we'll take that to the stove in a minute. We'll squeeze 1 or 2 lemons depending on size. I'm just using one that's pretty juicy. I wanted to give a quick little trick for lemons. If you have this device at home, we call it a reamer. You could use this like so to get in, get as much of that juice as possible. We're gonna strain this out for seeds in the pulp. Or in a pinch, if you don't have one of these or you don't have it handy, you can also use, if you have a tongs, a kitchen tong like this. This is a pretty common kitchen trick, is just use the tong and press it together and then really work it into that lemon or lime or whatever you're using. And you can get out just about as much as you would with a reamer or a mechanical machine. Some people also prefer the mechanical machine. But if you're just gonna do 1 lemon, probably easiest to do it by hand. I'm gonna strain this lemon juice out. And this, we won't cook the lemon juice. This will be added at the end as sort of a fresh factor along with the parsley that we'll cut. Now the parsley, as we've talked about previously with fresh herbs, you don't want to cut wet herbs. So I've already washed this, just rinsed it, and then kind of pressed a lot of the water out of it and dried the rest on a towel. So I'm just going to cut a good couple handfuls of this. I think fresh herbs are a great chance to work on your knife technique, because if you have a big pile that you have to work through, what I'd suggest is just start with the tip of your blade staying on the board. Whoops, looks like I went sideways there. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Good again? Okay.
Yes.
Apologies for that. Okay, so we got this little pile of parsley. I should mention this is curly leaf parsley. There's also Italian flat leaf parsley. You can use either one. If you have parsley in a recipe, you can use either type. The curly is a little bit trickier to chop just because it takes up more volume. But you can see I'm just working the knife through the parsley. Nobody really likes a big chunk of curly parsley in a dish, so it's good to get it broken down and not have any large pieces. And again, if your herb is wet, it just turns into like a wet mess, but this way it remains distinct. Parsley is also used in a lot of salads and dishes as another digestive aid that can help digest other foods. So that's why this dish is good if paired with something heavier, because a lot of parsley being added can help with digestion. So. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that size. We are going to, I'm going to take the original camera over to the stove, and we're just going to quickly prepare and throw together this dish. So I'll come back to the board to do some of the prep for the kosherie. Okay. All right, so spinning to our stove. All right, so now we're gonna turn this on a kind of, I'm gonna say medium low heat, just to not burn the garlic and to gently cook the garlic and cumin together. Now I have pre-prepared some cooked carrots. So I did this is about 4 large carrots. And I cooked it just until it's almost done, because we're gonna finish it off in this pan. We're adding just a couple tablespoons of olive oil. We'll add the garlic and cumin seeds. Again, Dry spices of any type can be expensive. So if you don't have cumin, you could also use caraway seed, or you could just omit the cumin and just use garlic for this step. This is the part where I wish I could invite y'all into the smells of the kitchen, but this is where toasting the spice really just brings out the aromatic flavor and is going to help kind of imbibe that flavor into the tossed salad. Now, if you might recall, we've been using the cumin several times now in the class. We used some cumin in the Indian dish, we've used some cumin in Mexican cuisine, and now here in the Moroccan cuisine. So it's one of those global spices that's used in many different cultures. So as I'm looking for doneness here, I'm just looking for like a light golden brown color on the garlic. And really, I'm also going by smell and fragrance. So I'm starting to smell, and then I'm looking for a little bit of color, and then I'll be ready to add the carrots. It's looking a little dry. I'm gonna add a touch more olive oil. This is also a dish that does well if made in advance. It doesn't need to be served immediately or stay warm. In fact, if it sits for a while, the flavors can kind of meld. So I'd suggest you can make it in advance and then serve it up either room temperature or even chill as part of a meal. All right, so I'm seeing a little bit of color. I like how it looks and smells. I'm adding the carrots. Again, these have been previously cooked, just sort of tender, like tooth tender, but not overcooked. I want them to keep their shape. You could turn up the heat at this point and get some color on the carrots if you'd like. You can get them like a golden brown color. If the carrots aren't done enough, you can add a little water to steam them a little and put a lid on it. It's really just getting them to the doneness that you want. All right, so I'm pretty happy with where I'm at in terms of the taste and texture. I'm gonna add our last fresh ingredients. I'm gonna turn the heat off, add the carrots back to this bowl. Scraping out all the goodness from the pot. And now I'm adding a touch more olive oil, fresh parsley. I'm not gonna add all of it, just half. And this is where it's really a matter of taste. I'm adding lemon juice and a touch more salt. And just balancing the lemon and the salt is kind of what's next. But you can see it's pretty well flavored. It's got the parsley, the cumin, the garlic, lemon, salt, and it's ready to go, ready to be served immediately or held as a side dish. So the hot sauce that I mentioned, super simple, is just tomato. I've already pureed it in advance and got it simmering on the stove, but it's tomato, jalapeno. I found a massive jalapeno, so I only used just one slice of it. And I didn't use much of the seeds because I didn't want it to be too spicy, but you can use as much or as little jalapeno as you like. Whole garlic cloves, and you just puree that with a touch of salt, oil, and a little water if you need to. That's our hot sauce. The other part of this that requires a bit of care and attention, which we're going to go back to the stove to do together, is the fried onions. Now the onions are an essential part of this dish. They bring a lot of flavor and they kind of tie it all together. And we're cooking the onions in a fair amount of oil. This is one of the few times that we'll do what I would call a deep fried preparation on the onion, or during this class, is because you get this nice dark rich golden brown kind of color and flavor that is hard to get otherwise. So you could caramelize the onions slower and lower, but this deep fry method can really accelerate that process and get the caramelization going. So as far as how we're cutting these, I've already cut 4 whole onions that I have over there ready to roll, but I just took off the top and then part of the tail, just the loose pieces at the end, as we've done onions in the past. In this case, we're just cutting this way. So we're just cutting what I would call rainbows of onions. And again, consistency is the key. Trying to get the same cut on each. You don't have to get crazy thin, but whatever you do, just try and do it consistently. When you get to this part of the onion, I usually say it's not worth cutting yourself. You're sliding down. So just flip it over onto a flat and then cut again about the same thickness. So the importance here again is get roughly the same thickness, because as we fry these, we don't want to have too much color variation between them. All right, so back to the stove, and we're going to talk about the kosherie process and the frying of the onions. I'll start with the onions, since that takes, if we could switch that camera again. There we go, yep. So I'm gonna start with the onions because that takes the most care and attention. So I'm using a heavy bottomed saucepan. I'm using a cast iron pan, but any sort of thick heavy bottom pan will work. I'm gonna turn that on pretty high, like medium high to high. And I'll show you in a minute how to kind of check when it's ready to drop those onions in. What I am doing here in the back is, you'll see, this is that hot sauce that I mentioned. So it's been simmering for a while. That's just the tomato, jalapeno, garlic, a touch of water, and salt. And so that's going to be the agent that kind of you put over the dish, adds flavor. This is where the timing piece comes in, because we're also trying to time the pasta and the brown rice. So I made plenty sure by cooking the brown rice early. It took about 45 minutes. I've got that going on the back. And then I have my pasta pot working here. It's at a boil. Going here. I'm going to add that whole grain penne, which takes about 9 minutes. So get that going on a furious boil, as we say. And then the other piece is the lentils, which again, pretty simple preparation as seen in the recipe. It's just roughly 3/4 cup of lentils with 3 cups of water. And this cooks for about 25 minutes. So we've got all the components ready to roll. So back to our onion pan. Again, as I tell my 13-year-old son when he likes to try some things in the kitchen, never leave a hot pan on the stove unattended, especially hot oil. One simple way to see if it's getting to the temperature you want is just touch like a tip or a little piece of the onion in the oil. You should immediately see like some bubbles. I don't see them yet, so still waiting to get it to the right heat. And so this is kind of the bit of orchestration that it's going to take to get all these things ready at the same time. So this is probably the skill to this dish. But again, like I said, I prepared the lentils in advance and the rice in advance, and then it's just the pasta and the onions that are kind of the last minute. So as we get through this next step and get these onions going, I just wanted to open it up to questions, see if anyone had anything so far that we've covered or other questions on preparation.
Nothing.
I'm going to go ahead and add my first batch of onions. Again, the other reason we start with quite a lot of oil is because we want to be able to do a lot of onions at once. I'm doing 4 whole onions, and they'll cook down greatly, as you see, into just kind of about a cup or so's worth. But we want to be able to pack in a good amount of onions. Make sure they're all submerged. And we want to get somewhere between like a golden brown and a dark brown color. A couple of notes on the hot sauce. So when you first do it, when you first blend it, it's going to be like a very, very light color. It's just going to look very different than like a tomatoey. But as you cook it down, it should get more to like a red orange. So don't be surprised if you cook it down and it cooks down to like about half the volume of what you had originally.
Stephen, we have a question. If you could please repeat the quantities that you put into the hot sauce.
Yeah, so per the recipe, it's roughly 4 medium to large tomatoes. The jalapeno is up to you. I'd say at the most you could use 1 whole jalapeno, and at the least use like a piece of one, like a strip, or a couple strips of the jalapeno. And then I use 2 to 3 garlic cloves, depending on the size, and then a pinch of salt and some oil, and then you can taste for salt at the end. And you don't need to really do much with the tomatoes. Just take off like the brown piece at the top, like the stem piece. And apart from that, you just chop it up roughly and throw it in the blender or food processor. While we wait for these onions to cook, does anyone have any comments or, I don't know, successes or not successes with trying to use whole grains? Back to kind of the nutrition piece that we started with, using whole grains within either your own meals or your family's meals. I don't know if you can hear that, but the onions they're bubbling pretty furiously, and I'm starting to see them wilt, like they're all kind of losing their texture. So just stay with them at this point, move them around occasionally, make sure they stay submerged. And then we also have a plate, or keep a plate nearby with like a paper towel or some sort of absorbent material so that we can drain them off when the time is right. As I'm cooking off the whole grain pasta here, just one tip: if you're not used to cooking whole grain pasta, or if you're new to it, much like any other pasta, I like to just take a piece off and then cut it with a knife or take a bite out of it and have a look. And you can actually see and taste if there's like a dryness or a whiteness in the center. And once that's gone, is a good time to drain them. So just whole grains, they can be a little bit hard to tell when they're done. So I think it's always worth checking one piece and then before you drain them off. I do have, I guess one other thing I want to talk about was sodium and the use of salt in this dish. So as I've talked about a little before, my basic philosophy as a chef and dietitian is to add salt to dishes and layer salt into dishes. So as opposed to adding a bunch of salt at the end. So the way that plays out here is I've added a pinch of salt to the brown rice. I was always taught with pasta to add a fair, 2 or 3 tablespoons, a good amount of salt to the pasta water. So that adds a flavor and a flavor base. A pinch of salt in the lentils, roughly a teaspoon in the hot sauce, and then I'll sprinkle a little bit of salt on this. So in the end, there's not that much sodium in the dish, but if each part of the dish has its own flavor and a base level of like a small amount of salt, I think that helps as opposed to adding salt at the end. And that's kind of a basic cooking philosophy that I do really believe in, especially if you're looking at a low sodium diet or on a low sodium diet because of health reasons. And as far as the lentil component of this dish, if you either don't have access to lentils or don't like lentils, the flavor and texture, I was looking up some variations on the kosherie, and you can also use any type of bean, but especially recommended garbanzo beans because the garbanzos will go well with the rice, pasta, and the tomato-based sauce. So garbanzos straight out of the can, drained, is another option in place of the lentils. All right, my onions still have a couple more minutes. My pasta's done, so I'm going to drain this. If you're trying to keep the pasta warm and keep it hot for the rest of the components, I like to just turn the heat off, strain it or drain it, put it directly in a pot, and then add a touch of olive oil or butter just to keep it loose and separate it while we wait for the rest of the dishes. And usually the heat coming off the pot is just enough to kind of keep it warm and ready to serve. So I'm starting to assemble the dish in anticipation of our onions. These are the 2 grains and the lentils. So this is how you could just serve it in separate piles like this, or you could just kind of heap it all up in a bowl like they do with the street food situation in Egypt. And then what we're going to add is those deep fried onions and the hot sauce as the finishing touch. And given the heat wave we're about to experience, granted you're using the stove here a bit, but you're not using an oven, which is good. I try to avoid an oven as much as I can. We've got 100-degree days coming, so stovetop or cold meals seem awfully appealing on those hot days. So as you can see, it's taken a good little while. This has been about 10 minutes already. And then we're just waiting for a little more color. You can add a bit of salt to the onions even as they cook in the hot oil because it's going to help draw out a little bit more of the moisture and help kind of cook them a little bit faster, pull out more of the water from the onion. And the temptation is sometimes to walk away and let them cook, but at some point here, they're going to reach that quick turning point where they go from white in color to golden brown to dark to burnt. So this is the part, just stay with them. So I have not been to Egypt. My wife has, and I've known a couple other people that have traveled in Egypt. And apparently, in the street, with the way they prepare this dish, is they pretty much have four like high burners going, and they're constantly cooking like batches and batches of each of these. So as you walk through the streets of Cairo, apparently you have someone cooking rice, cook the lentils, boiling the pasta, and frying the onions. And it's just kind of an ongoing, constant process. As one of the most common street foods that Yelling have. And it's cheap. Like of all the recipes we've done in this class, this is actually the lowest per portion cost. So, at less than $1 per portion, you can cook up this dish. And people will think it's pretty fancy. It's really kind of a common street food, but it's different, it's unusual, it's nutritious, and it's really economical. As long as you like onions. If you don't like onions, you can still make the dish and just use the hot sauce as the flavor binder. But even people who don't like the raw onion taste or taste of raw onions seem to like a well-cooked onion, a caramelized onion, or a dark, deep-fried onion like these. All right, I'm gonna pull some of these. Sorry, it's taking a bit longer than I thought, but I'll pull some. You get the idea. They probably would take another, I don't know, 3-4 minutes from here to get to that kind of golden brown that we're looking for. But I'm just gonna take a few off just to show you the plate presentation. So just imagine you cook these a little bit more. They're kind of between a golden brown and a dark brown in color. You add a sprinkling of salt. Top those, let them drain a bit. And you're putting that, I put them right in the center of the dish. And take our hot sauce, give it a stir, because sometimes it tends to separate the solids and the liquids, so give it a little stir. And then put that right in the center. It should be like a really nice kind of glowing red-orange color. Over to the board. If we could have a look, Jessica, at the overhead view. We got the final plating on these two. So here's the kosherie, the brown rice, whole grain pasta, lentils, onions, and the hot sauce, and the Moroccan carrot salad. My one failing is I did not start the onions soon enough. So don't let that trip you up if you're making this dish. Start them sooner than I did. So I'd say based on what I saw today on a normal burner, it might take more like 15, 20 minutes as opposed to 10. So you can give yourself time for that, but all the more reason to have the other stuff kind of hot and ready to roll. So you can finish off the onions and serve. Okay, that is most of the content for today's lesson. I just want to have quick questions, any discussion, and then we're also going to talk about some upcoming classes and events. But first, I want to take any time for questions on what we've done today. If there's no questions, I just want to talk about a few of the upcoming classes and events. So next week we are doing a Middle Eastern class. So we're moving kind of contiguously from North Africa into the Middle East. So we're going to be doing some hummus, baba ganoush, some pita bread, a few dishes of the Middle East, and then we're taking a week off later. It's that following week, and then we're going to be coming back to have our last main content class, and then we're actually doing an in-person get-together that we're going to put out some word out about in early August. It'll be on a Wednesday night, same time as this class. And we're gonna be doing a little mini potluck, a chance to kind of get together and work through or bring some of the foods from our native cuisines or our family heritage, talk through those. And then we're also doing a class, or as part of that class, we're talking about food styling, food photography, and plating. So if anyone has been on the class and is interested, I think it'll be a really fun chance to get together and trade notes and kind of celebrate some of the learning that we've done in the class. So that's what's upcoming. Jessica, did you have anything else?
No, I think you covered it. We did have somebody said the recipe looks delicious and healthy. And thank you for a great class.
Great, thank you. Does this seem approachable, doable? Is this something that you might try at home, or I don't want it to seem too complex. Just because there's 5 components, it doesn't mean that it's complicated. Like the recipes themselves are fairly straightforward, and then it's just a matter of timing. So
We got an absolutely.
cool.
Yeah, and another great thing is that some of these items are kind of staples in our pantry. So if you're coming through feeding families or using a mobile pantry, there's a pretty good chance you'll get some of these. So that gives you ideas for what to do with some of those dried items. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And then, like Stephen talked about for next class, just make sure to sign up on the Eventbrite link that you've been using to sign up. It's the same Zoom link, but that way you'll get the recipes ahead of time. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. My email goes on those as well. And we look forward to seeing you next week, and hopefully you can join us at the potluck.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you again soon.
Bye. Have a great evening.
Take care.